throughout the 1920s, he had his rhetoric of wars of aggression, enlarging the German living space, or the Lebensraum, as the Germans called it, in Eastern Europe, taking revenge for the Versailles Treaty and not adhering to the Versailles Treaty. So this belligerent rhetoric from Hitler, and his general, well, insanity and just absolute full-on aggression was clear to everyone. So when his party came to power in 1933, everybody knew what they could expect from this man. He also very quickly did prove that it wasn't just rhetoric. He did start to withdraw Germany from these provisions of the Versailles Treaty, started building up an army again. And in 1934, that founder of modern Poland, Józef Piłsudski, he knew what was coming. So he contacted the French and offered that the French and the Germans, the French and the Poles should conduct a preemptive strike against the Germans and remove Hitler from power, and thus neutralizing this threat. At that moment, the Germans really had no army that could oppose a joint, well, they had no army that could oppose just a French attack, but a two-front assault from Poland and France would have meant that Hitler would have been gone from power within 2, 3, or 4 weeks tops, and the bloodshed would have been minimal on all sides. Unfortunately, that was an opportunity that was missed. When the French declined the Polish offer, this is when the Poles realized that no preemptive strike would come, and instead they would have to try to somehow live with Nazi Germany as a neighbor, and thus they signed this Treaty of Non-Aggression in 1934. However, returning to these Soviet plans, with this aggression being built up, apart from the occupation of the Rhineland, you later had you had the retaking the Saar area, you had the Anschluss of Austria, and then finally you have the Munich Agreement as well. And the Munich Agreement was another missed opportunity. If there would have been a coalition of states, the broader the better, naturally. There are some people who speculate that if the Poles and Czechoslovakia would have decided to fight together against the Germans in 1938, that would have been enough.
Because the Czechs, of course, were also a very well-equipped nation.
Which is also usually not mentioned by, it hasn't seeped into the collective
and
historical...
just going back a bit further, I think in the First World War it was generally reckoned that the Skoda field guns were better than the Krupps field guns. I mean, something, again, people don't immediately think of, but... and because in Munich, the bit of Czechoslovakia which was ceded to Hitler was, of course, unfortunately, the bit of Czechoslovakia which had all the industry in it, but B, actually, was the more defendable part of the country.
Absolutely. Those parts are highly mountainous. In those mountains, you had a situation that could be compared to that in Switzerland, in which the army had been training for years and years. They had been building various tunnels. They had stored ammunition in caves. They had artillery pieces that were set up to defend entries into valleys. It was a very good defensive position. And also, today we think of just Czechia being Czechia, but the Czechoslovaks, they lost also a lot of people during the war. But before the war, it was a large state in Europe. The combined Slovakia and Czechia together was a force to be reckoned with. And also, as you mentioned, with Czechia's industrial capacity, the Industrial Revolution had arrived in Czechia very early on. They had been industrializing for a long time, and they had been an economically prosperous area since the early medieval ages. They were a part of the Holy Roman Empire. Their economy was integrated to that of the Holy Roman Empire, of various economic centers, even in the Flanders and other parts of what is today the Benelux region, which was very rich. They weren't very far from northern Italy either. So naturally, on the other side of the country in Slovakia, you had a slightly more rural area in which the economic output was much lower. But the combined demographic strength of Slovakia and Czechia, combined with the industrial capacity of Czechia and the military industry, which was very large. If you then add it with a Poland of 35 million people, which also had a large army, maybe not as well armed as it would have wished, since there had been great difficulties in the 1920s of creating a single state, since Poland had been partitioned between 3 different powers for more than 120 years. And then you had the economic crisis of, the Great Depression of 1929 did in the end reach Europe and Central Europe as well.